and these kinds of laws in other states? Are they stepping up and helping get this passed in other states yet?
Yes, actually, they've been involved in this working group that we've had all across the U.S. We've had people from industry, different groups that, see this as really a more long-term solution to what's going on. Health benefits especially. It's nice to be able to have a health benefit system that flows with the individual across multiple jobs. We're in the economy now where you may not be doing just a single job, right? You may be, driving for different delivery services. You may be doing reservations. You may do those things at the same time. It'd be really nice if their benefits really flowed with them so that they weren't concerned about an employer that was paying for that.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of American Potential. The world is changing, and 1 in 10 Americans use independent or gig work as their primary source of income. There's something that they lack compared to regular employees, though, and that is traditional benefits. Now, gig jobs like food delivery, package delivery, transportation drivers, they all fall under laws that were written 100 years ago and prevent employers from being able to offer their contract workers benefits. Some have tried to take on this issue by narrowing the definition of a contract worker, but the problem is that it takes away the flexibility of other aspects that contract workers enjoy, like flexibility. Now, the other option is to make benefits portable for contract workers, and one state has taken this on. Utah decided to offer portable benefits to its independent contractors, which is the first state in the nation to do this. Now, today's guest is the chief sponsor of the legislation, Utah State Senator John Johnson, and also joining us is Americans for Prosperity Regional State Director Heather Andrews. And they're here to talk about how this will benefit the more than 80,000 contract workers in Utah. Senator, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. It's really nice to be with you.
Heather, thanks for joining us as well.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Okay, well, Senator, first of all, I want to know where this idea come from. I mean, to be the first in the nation to push this forward is really something. Tell us where the idea came from.
Well, actually, I've worked a lot with a local group called Libertas, and one of their people, Caden Rosenblatt, I actually had this original idea, and we talked about it quite a bit, and then they helped develop the legislation. Of course, AFP was there to help us all along the way, and Heather was really instrumental in helping us to talk to people in the legislature. So, ideally, this would be a federal law so that because when you're an employee, that adds additional cost to the employer, and traditionally it's an employee benefit, and so what we wanted to do is separate that from being an employee, because there's significant consequences to someone like Uber, let's say, where they might have workers that only work a couple of hours a day, right? They can't afford to the tax consequences to having these people on. So what we decided was we would start this in Utah, and we would start with insurance benefits, because that's one that really should be portable, I think, across people. So that's where we began. And since then, though, we've got a national group that we've been having conference calls with to try to get this legislation spread across the U.S. And we even had people from Senator Mike Lee's office in there, and they hope to introduce this federally as well.
So why was it important, I guess, to really focus on portable benefits instead of changing the definition of independent workers, which is what I think has always been tried in the past?
Well, mainly because we were looking at only overcoming the state consequences. So there are, like for instance, if you're an employer in the state of Utah, you've got to pay workman's comp, for instance. You've got to register people as employees. And so, we visited with the state insurance commission and the tax commission to try to see if we could come up with some way of separating then the worker and the company and just create a benefit pool that the company could contribute to. So that's where it started. And I think that's a way to get this going. And then as we get more states coming on board with that, I think it'll be easier to pass it as a federal law.
So, some people truly enjoy the flexibility of this kind of work. And I think back, 30 years ago, work was a lot different than it is today. It was a little more one size fits all, but the flexibility of this kind of work is truly remarkable. And I will tell you, every time I get in an Uber or, any kind of a car like that, and I talk to the driver, the first thing they tell me is how much they love the flexibility. I can just get in, I can work as long as I want, and I can turn it off and go home and be with my family or whatever. That is really something that is, I won't say brand new, but it's definitely new over the last 10 years in our economy. And this really does help give those workers stability, as well as that continued flexibility. Isn't that right?
Yes. And there's other types of gig work that's going on too. Like, for instance, you may be a reservation clerk for one of the airlines and working at home. Let's say if you have small children and you decide you want to work part-time, well, you can turn that on and you can turn it off when you want to get out of the workforce. And, many drivers that drive for Uber also drive for Lyft, right? And so they may be working for both of them at the same time.
Right. Yeah, it's very true. Heather, let me bring you in here quickly as well on that. I mean, was that really the impetus to this? Were you hearing from a lot of different people about this being a problem with the gig economy?
Yes, we heard from several individuals, and I think there's a lot of concern as well over what the federal government is trying to do. California also passed a bill that restricted and forced organizations and companies to hire these workers as traditional employees, which caused a huge, portion of that workforce to lose their jobs. And then, because of the backlash, and they realized how much it had failed, they had to go back and change that and exempt, different individuals and professions from what they passed. So yeah, we've heard from lots of people across the state that are in similar situations to what yourself and Senator Johnson mentioned. There's moms, there's college, a lot of college. We have a lot of colleges here, a lot of students that are going to school that would like to do this as to earn and help, make money towards their schooling. And it works for them because it's very flexible and they can work around their college schedule. We have a lot of we heard from several single mothers. There's a couple of older individuals that I've talked to that were doing this because of health reasons. They have significant health issues that prevent them from working normal 9-to-5 jobs. And so this kind of gig work and independent, flexible work helps them to be able to provide income even with their health issues.
You raise a good point. You mentioned California and some of the things that they tried to do. I mean, this really is an issue of freedom, right? And of liberty and of employees or workers wanting to decide how they want to work. In California, there were many politicians who felt like they knew what work should be and sort of forced a one-size-fits-all solution on the state of California. In Utah, you're doing it differently, Senator. You're really focused on giving people empowering people really with the ability to work in the way they choose to work. Isn't that really what this is all about?
Yeah, I have a guy in my neighborhood that retired from his job when he got sick. He had cancer. He beat it, and then he's sitting around and thinking, I want to go back to work. So he actually picks up Uber on the weekends and drives and gets extra money. And I think there's a lot more people that kind of like that idea of maybe going into the workforce and then coming out of the workforce. I was surprised. We really got a lot of support for this bill in Utah. It was a very bipartisan effort. I think there were only one or two people that voted against it that have strong union connections. And, when I think about that, I think, the unions really ought to think about this in terms of maybe they could run benefit pools that people could be part of, that the employers could contribute to. And so I think we need to think in different terms. We're in a different state of the economy. This idea of gig work is not done. I think it's going to only get stronger.
Heather, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, if you look at a tale of two states, obviously, California trying to clamp down and say what work, define work and what it must be, versus the state of Utah that is taking a different approach and said, work's going to be whatever the citizens of Utah kind of decide work will be for them individually.
Yeah. Well, we did hear from some individuals that are more, right-leaning or libertarian that were concerned because, as we know, like passing a bill or telling organizations and companies what to do is not our MO either. We're not here to try to force companies or organizations to do something that they don't want to do. But this is actually in response to there's many CEOs of organizations like Uber and Lyft that have come out and publicly said, hey, we want to be able to offer these, but we need help from the states. We can't act entirely on our own. So we need to remove some of these barriers for us to allow us to be able to provide these kind of flexible benefits to our workers. And so it was in response to, the CEOs and leadership of these organizations and companies saying, please help us help these individuals who want this. And that's why we, got engaged and involved. It's not because we're trying to force, companies or organizations to, do something or, provide this. In no way is it that. It's just removing barriers to allow them the flexibility to be able to provide these benefits.
Yeah, and in Utah, many companies, most companies, I'm sure, will continue with business as usual. This is just the flexibility for people who choose to do this kind of work to be able to do it and still have that ability to have benefits, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
well,
and
today,
I guess
today we
go ahead, Senator.
Oh, I was just going to say today, in today's environment, it's not like it was 50 years ago where people would go to work for one company and stay there their entire career. So just the idea of having benefits that follow the employee rather than the employer is a really good thing. And I think this can be used in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think, when I think about health insurance, that how wonderful that would be. We talk about that with pensions a lot of times that, when we have these fights over defined benefit or defined contribution pensions, one of the benefits of a defined contribution pension system is it belongs to the employee. They can take it if they want to work somewhere for 7 years or so and they're not vested and they want to go somewhere else. They can do that. And this is sort of a similar idea and concept, Heather, isn't that right?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so some of the stories, Senator Johnson mentioned one about a neighbor, but tell me some of the stories you were hearing from people. I guess I'll start with Senator Johnson, and then I'll go to you, Heather. But Senator Johnson, some of the stories that you've been hearing from people that really were the driving force behind changing this law.
Well, I think that's, to start with, it was really the gig economy, but I think people saw that it was really a bigger idea than that. In fact, a lot of the news stories that ended up coming out about this bill started as stories just on portable benefits, not really connected to the gig economy. And then people began to see how important this was for the gig economy. And we had a number of businesses that came together with us, and we formed a working group to to talk about this issue, talk about what our next steps were going to be, and then get more people involved in it. We're actually turning this into an ideal type of legislation that could be done in other states where we do all the groundwork for it. So,
yeah. Heather, stories. I'm sure you have great stories from activists and others who helped you, testify before the legislature and those sorts of things.
Yeah. So actually, one is my daughter. She was, had not gone into college yet. She was kind of trying to figure out what she wanted to do, and she was in a full-time job, but they decided to cut her hours at her employer because due to lots of different reasons. And so she was kind of forced to find something in between, looking for a new job or just to provide supplemental income for her, because in order to make ends meet. And so she decided to start door dashing, which is, a lot of us have benefited from DoorDash at some point, especially during COVID. That's when I used it a lot because, you're sitting inside and can't go out and can't get in front of people. So it was very convenient to have food delivered to your door. And so she started driving during the times when she wasn't working her full-time employment. Well, eventually, she lost her employment and lost her benefits. And so it was, she started doing more of the door dashing full-time and, also needed the benefits. And she talked to me about how they don't offer, there's nothing available. And so that was one of the reasons why I started looking into it and found out, some of the barriers that government was putting up to prevent some of these individuals from allowing these organizations and companies to provide benefit options for their employees or for these workers, independent workers. Then, there was another young mother who her husband worked, different shift hours, and she was left to help take care of the kids at home when he was at work. And in order to supplement income for their household, when he returned and became the primary caregiver after his job, she would go and work and drive for Uber Lyft. And this provided her flexibility to be able to work during times when a lot of people were not. It was like early morning hours when her kids were basically sleeping. But she, talked about as well, like how nice it would be to have benefits to be able to provide, health insurance, whether it's different other kinds of insurance and benefits for her family and young kids. And so that was another individual that we talked to that was, in wanting more options there.
Well, and we talk a lot about government imposed barriers. And again, the reason that in many states, these folks can't do that, they can't work at the job that they want, is because government has a law that prevents them from doing it. We talked about California wanting to restrict that even more. And so, this is, people want to live, I think, in states that are freer, that give them more opportunity. And this is certainly one of those. Senator, let me ask you, you mentioned that this is could be model legislation. Are you finding certainly other states that want to do this? But also, I would imagine you have a lot of businesses. I would say some of these, you talked about airline, worker who is maybe on a customer service line, or, are there airlines and Uber and, some of the companies that would enjoy having these kind of workers and these kinds of laws in other states? Are they stepping up and helping get this passed in other states yet?
Yes, actually, they've been involved in this working group that we've had all across the U.S. We've had people from industry, different groups that see this as really a more long-term solution to what's going on. Health benefits especially. It's nice to be able to have a health benefit system that flows with the individual across multiple jobs. We're in the economy now where you may not be doing just a single job, right? You may be, driving for different delivery services. You may be You may be doing reservations. You may do those things at the same time. Maybe during the day, it might be more convenient to be on a reservation line. At night, it may be more convenient to, drive to another city and then drive Uber for a while. And, people are more concerned today, too, about their work-life balance. And so we may have situations where people go into the economy, get a job. They might work for 6 months and then take a couple of months off to be with their family and then go back to work somewhere else. Well, it'd be really nice if their benefits really flowed with them so that they weren't concerned about an employer that was paying for that.
Yeah. Senator, did you have opposition? It sounds like overall it passed by a very, very wide margin. Well, but were there interests that were opposed to this that fought you?
Well, the only ones we even had any difficulty with was people that there were a couple of Democrats that were tight with the unions, and I think originally the unions didn't think this was such a good idea, but truthfully, they could use this as a platform to be a part of the new gig economy. I could see them really hosting these benefits and offering those to individuals in the gig economy.
Well, I think unions that would be in favor of workers, yes. Unions, and sometimes, if they're in favor of union bosses and consolidating power, I would say no. But certainly there are unions out there that do care about workers and should care. They certainly should care about workers. But yeah, exactly right. Chambers of commerce, for instance, had things called affinity programs where they could pool health benefits and things like that for a long period of time. This would be a similar thing that unions could embrace and get behind, I would think.
Absolutely. The economy's changed.
Yeah.
People, the ability to do this, it has changed, right? I mean, it hasn't been that long where we've actually had the ability for people to work from home and be able to work for multiple different people.
Yeah. Heather, let me talk about AFP's support, Americans for Prosperity support for the bill. How did AFP support the bill? What did you do to try and help the legislature and Senator Johnson get this through?
Yeah, so we did try to talk to individuals that were, in these jobs and in these roles to kind of get their stories, to hear from them about how this legislation could potentially impact them. And had connected them to their representative and senator. But like Senator Johnson said, SB 233 really it had amazing support in the Senate. There wasn't one senator who voted no on the bill, and that included all the Democrats, which was surprising because there's a couple that never vote yes on any Republican bills. So I was pretty shocked about that. And that goes to, Senator Johnson's good work as well, explaining what the bill does. And, our work too, as well, and Caden did a lot of work with Libertas. And when you have different organizations also coming together that are, supportive and helping, talk to legislators about this, I think it makes an impact. And then also, hearing those personal stories from individuals who are affected, also, I think makes a huge difference and impact. And that's where, we come in, we really try to find people and those stories and get them connected to their representatives so that they can share. In the House, it had another huge bipartisan support in the House. And that's also kind of unheard of in a way. We had two, like Senator Johnson said, Democrats who, yes, were more union oriented, who voted no on the bill. But for the most part, the rest of the Democrats joined Republicans to pass and support the bill. And then, of course, the governor was eager and excited to be able to sign.
Yeah, well, Senator Johnson, I guess final question for you. This is obviously we hope other states will pick this up, but it's interesting. You have a bill like this that goes through, I mean, almost unanimously. Certainly, it sounds like two House Democrats voted against it, but other than that, unanimously signed by the governor. Utah's been a state for a lot of years. You've probably been in the legislature a lot of years. It's interesting when you find legislation or really good ideas like this that are just sitting out there. And of course, this one needed time for our economy to sort of present this opportunity. But that's an interesting thing. I mean, had you not taken this up, this would not exist anywhere in the United States, any state. Does that? I mean, you should be proud of that, number one, but it should encourage you to continue to look for these kinds of ideas where you can really change and transform your state. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and not only transform the state, but hopefully lead to, federal legislation that makes sense. The distinction between employees and private contractors, that's something that needs to be brought up to the times that we live in, and I think that happens one piece at a time. A big shout out to AFP. One of the really good things about what AFP does is they put a lot of faith in the local leaders. And at that time, Heather was in charge of AFP for the state. They put a lot of faith in them and allow them flexibility in what they get behind and support. And, they've always been really great at supporting liberty in the state and being able to expand that. And, sometimes those opportunities may be different from state to state. And that's why I love the way the organization is set up.
Well, yeah, thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. And that raises a good point. I'll ask this of Heather, kind of a final question. There is a lot of transformative stuff that Americans for Prosperity has worked on and that has passed in the state of Utah. And I think it's two things. One, I think it's a testament to you, Heather, and to your leadership there in the state, but also to, really unaligned legislature and political climate that allows you to be able to do bills like this. But there have been a lot of things. I mean, you just recently passed education savings accounts, and then just going back, there's been so many things. Maybe you could name a couple of the great things that Utah has done over the last 4 or 5 years that really have been transformative, Heather.
Yeah, thank you. It all started with the big fight on Medicaid expansion when we had only one individual, the Speaker of the House, the current Speaker, who was in opposition. We had a governor who wanted to expand. We had the media that was trying to get everyone to expand. We had a Senate president who was supportive of expansion. And he was like, where are the conservative organizations that are helping us educate the populace on how, this could destroy our state, this could destroy our budget. And so we came in. That's how actually the state chapter started. Knocked thousands of doors across the state and educated voters on how this could essentially potentially bankrupt our state. And we're able to defeat that. And then, moving on to tax reform, we had some really bad tax proposed reforms that were going to create a lot of issues and imbalance in the state. And again, we did a lot of education efforts. We talked individually to representatives and senators, and we were able to get reforms that actually made sense and kept things solvent, that didn't affect certain groups of individuals, didn't, and was very fair, transparent, kept things, actually gave taxpayers back more of their hard-earned money. That's another huge win in our state. We were able to remove a lot of barriers to medicine and care there that way, with expanding scope of practice for many types of healthcare workers, especially at the time of COVID. It hit, and we were able to expand access in rural areas. Telehealth was a big one too, removing government barriers to telehealth. I could go on and on, but I don't want to bore everyone, so I'll stop there.
No, it's not. Yeah. But it really is. I mean, Utah is one of those states that really has just transformed over the last 10 years or so with some of the great legislation that you passed. So, well, Senator Johnson, thank you for joining us. Thanks for sponsoring this legislation. Heather, thank you as well for pushing this forward and all the great work that's done in Utah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, listen, this is an exciting time for the state of Utah, but it can be an exciting time for every state in America. They also ought to step up and pass a similar bill that would allow flexibility for America's workers around the country. This is one of those ideas, but as I said, there's so many of them, and Utah has stepped up and done a great job on issue after issue. Again, different than what some other states like California are doing. They're going in the wrong direction. States like Utah are headed in the right direction. Listen, liberty and freedom are precious. Stand up and defend liberty and freedom. Thanks for joining us for another episode of American Potential.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.